The humming of oxygen regulators echoed through the sterile corridors of Station Aurea, buried deep in the Perseid sector. Dr. Evan Maris, head medical officer, scrolled through his hollow schedule, eyes narrowing at the final entry, a new crew member from Tharnis Prime needing a standard onboarding exam. He sighed, rubbing his temples. Another alien biology crash course, he muttered, rolling his shoulders before standing. 6 rotations on Aurea had introduced him to species he'd never even seen in textbooks. Tharnisians were newcomers to the coalition of unified worlds, and their medical data was patchy at best. Evan pulled on his charcoal gray coat, adjusted the diagnostic cluster on his wrist, and checked that the medbay was fully sanitized. As the automatic door whispered open, his eyes widened. Standing just outside was a figure unlike any he'd treated before. Her skin shimmered a deep jade, as if polished under soft moonlight. Her eyes glowed a piercing silver, intelligent and watchful. Long ivory tendrils, not hair but something like it, were swept back and adorned with metallic clips. Her dark suit was laced with glowing symbols and split panels along the limbs, revealing traces of lean musculature. Around her neck rested a silver ring, a symbol of her caste, no doubt. "You must be Dr. Maris," she said, her voice carrying a fluid, chime-like resonance. The translator struggled to keep up with her tonal shifts. Evan nodded. "Yes. Welcome to Aurea. And you are?" "I am Viral Sanner, second stratum of the analytical order, assigned to data synthesis and archival management." "Then you're here for your onboarding eval." He gestured to the reclining chair. "Just a routine check before you're cleared for duty." Viral entered slowly, examining the equipment. "Your instruments appear elementary," she said, tapping the edge of a bioscanner. "We're efficient, not flashy," Evan replied with a dry grin. "Sometimes a sharp eye beats a laser probe." She tilted her head, then nodded. "Proceed." She settled stiffly into the chair, posture rigid. Evan ran the base vitals, neural response, pulse wave, internal pressure. All seemed well within expected parameters. Her data was sparse, but everything checked out. "All right," he said, setting the scanner aside. "One last thing. We do a standard reproductive health assessment. Basic protocol." Her body stiffened. "Reproductive?" "Yes. Just a non-invasive scan to ensure no underlying health issues." "I'll adjust the chair." "Stop." Evan blinked. Vera was upright, her expression alarmed, almost panicked. Her voice dropped low. "Why do you require access to my reproductive organs, doctor?" He raised his hands. "It's not invasive, I promise. Just a quick screening." "To what end? Do you intend to initiate mating?" "What? No, not at all. It's just a health scan." Her eyes blazed silver. "On Tharnis, such exposure is sacred. To show those regions to someone outside a bonded union is forbidden, punishable." Realization hit Evan like a meteor. He took a step back, voice softer. "I didn't know. I should have been briefed on your customs. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend or cross a line." She inhaled deeply, jaw still tight. "Intent does not negate impact, Dr. Maris. On my world, such a request will result in caste demotion or exile." "We can adjust," he said quickly. "There's a less detailed scan, completely external. Not ideal, but sufficient to meet coalition regs." Her gaze didn't soften, but the tension in her shoulders eased. "That would be acceptable." As he brought over the handheld bioscanner, he risked a smile. "I'll avoid any more sacred zones. Scout's honor." A flicker of amusement crossed her features. "You are strange human, but adaptable." They finished quickly. Her systems were within norms, with nothing alarming in the scans. Evan took a few notes, then asked, "Any conditions, allergies, concerns I should record?" She answered, more relaxed now. The room felt lighter. Her tone, while still clipped, no longer had the edge of a threatened diplomat. "I appreciate your accommodation, Dr. Maris," she said, standing. "My response earlier was strong. You were right to react. I was ignorant of your boundaries." As she turned to leave, she paused. "Perhaps not all humans are as brutish as the reports implied. He raised an eyebrow, but she was already gone. 3 cycles later, Evan spotted Viral in the Arboretum, a quiet domed area filled with bioengineered trees and synthetic streams. She stood by the outer viewport, gazing out at a blue gas cloud swirling past the station. He hesitated, then approached. "Beautiful out there, isn't it?" She turned, giving a small nod. "Dr. Maris, I didn't expect a meeting outside your lab." "Evan," he said, "we aren't always in scrubs." She glanced at him, then looked back at the nebula. "Your name lacks the structure of Tharnas designations. What should I call you?" "Viral Center of the Second Stratum feels formal. Viral will suffice." They stood in silence, listening to the hum of the station and the faint buzz of the containment shields. "I've been reading up on your people," Evan said. "Try not to step on more cultural landmines." "Tharnas culture is not public," she said. "We guard what others take for granted. I'd like to learn, not just as a physician, but out of respect." She studied him for a long moment. "What would you ask?" "Whatever you're willing to share. Start with what's not sacred." Viral smiled, faint, elusive, but unmistakable. "I could provide insight into human customs," Evan offered, "a kind of mutual cultural exchange." Viral's lips tilted into something just shy of a smile. "An equitable arrangement. I accept. How about dinner tomorrow?" he asked. "The galley tries to represent the galaxy's palate. Some dishes are even edible. I have noticed humans frequently combine nutrient intake with social rituals," Viral observed. "An efficient dual-purpose activity." Evan chuckled. "That's one way to put it. Say, 1900? "I will arrive punctually," she replied with a formal nod that somehow felt almost endearing. The following evening, the mess hall was quiet, most of the crew having finished their meals. Evan had snagged a table by the observation dome, ideal for conversation and nebula watching. "I took the liberty of reviewing Tharnas dietary profiles," he said as Viral approached. "Hope you don't mind. I asked the kitchen to prep a traditional protein compound from your sector." Viral paused. "You researched our nutritional composition?" "Part of the job," he said casually, omitting the fact that he'd spent over an hour scouring biological archives. She seated herself with calculated grace. As they ate, the conversation flowed easier than expected. Viral explained the societal framework of her people, the logical hierarchy of Tharnas castes. The scholars, the sentinels, and progenitors. "Wait," Evan said mid-bite, "your society separates reproduction into a dedicated class?" She nodded. "The progenitors manage genetic refinement. When a cycle is approved, genetic material is exchanged through ceremonial protocols." "So, you've never—" He paused, unsure how far he should go. "Engage in a reproductive rite," she finished for him. "No. The scholar caste prioritizes cognition and analysis. Our genetic contribution is only requested if specific cognitive traits are desired in a generation." Evan tried to hide his reaction. "That's incredibly structured." "Yes," she replied. "Whereas humans engage in reproductive behaviors recreationally." He nearly dropped his fork. "Well, yeah, sometimes it's not just for reproduction. It's about connection. Emotions. Intimacy." "Emotions," Vera repeated like she was testing the flavor of the word. "Tharnisians are trained to subordinate emotions to logic. They are not eradicated, only restrained. But you do feel things," Evan said, leaning forward slightly. "Of course. We simply don't let those impulses guide decisions." She studied him again, this time with a slow, curious intensity. "Your emotional transparency is captivating. You embrace what we contain." "Maybe both approaches have value," Evan offered. "Logic keeps the ship steady. But emotions? They remind us why we're steering it." For a moment, her gaze lingered on his mouth, then quickly lifted back to his eyes. "I find myself curious about human behavior," she said softly. The atmosphere between them shifted, denser, warmer, charged with something neither had expected. Evan became acutely aware of the way the light gleamed on her jade skin, how her tendrils framed her face in a way that was strange and somehow beautiful. "Curiosity is where understanding begins," he murmured. Viral's lips parted. But before she could answer, Evan's comm unit buzzed loudly. Dr. Marist, Medbay, Priority 1. Repeat, Dr. Marist to Medbay. Immediate. He exhaled, already standing. Sorry, emergency. No apology required. Viral replied, her expression returning to the cool professionalism she wore like armor. The knowledge exchange was informative. The medical bay was in chaos when he arrived. 2 humans and a Centauri officer lay unconscious on isolation beds, angry violet blotches crawling across their skin. Staff raced to apply emergency treatments while donning protective gear. What's happening? Evan asked, pulling on a BioSeal suit. Unknown pathogen. Chief Officer Patel said over monitor. Sector 7 breach. Coolant leak. These were first responders. Symptoms progressing rapidly. Evan knelt beside the nearest patient, a young engineer whose breath came in wheezing gasps. The Centauri, on the other hand, was twitching involuntarily. Different species, different symptoms, he muttered. We need cross-species virology. As if summoned by thought, the bay doors opened. Viral entered, still in her dinner clothes. I saw the emergency alert, she said, stepping carefully into the decontamination zone. My cognitive classification protocols might be of use. Evan gave a breathless laugh. Perfect timing. We're blind in here. For hours, they worked side by side. Viral's pattern recognition and data synthesis outpaced the diagnostic AI. She spotted correlations, narrowed the pathogen's vectors, and flagged species-specific vulnerabilities faster than anyone in the room. The agent targets different regulatory systems by biology, she concluded, examining a protein model, respiratory in humans, neural in Centauri. That's why standard antivirals are ineffective. Tailored treatments, Evan said, already sketching out protocols. By sunrise, the worst had passed. All 3 patients were stable. In the quiet aftermath, they collapsed into the chairs in his office. You save lives, Evan said, handing her a steaming mug. Viral eyed the drink suspiciously. This substance, coffee, human energizer. She sipped, and her silver eyes widened. It's stimulating. Exactly. She set it down, gathering herself. Regarding our prior conversation, I have been researching additional human behavioral data. Evan raised an eyebrow. Anything specific? Courtship patterns. He almost spilled his drink. Wait, what? I've observed certain rituals. Prolonged eye contact, incidental contact, strategic aloofness, techniques indicative of romantic engagement. You've been watching people flirt? Evan asked, half amused, half stunned. For comprehensive cultural understanding, she replied, dead serious. Before he could dig further, his communicator chimed again. Dr. Maris, incoming vessel requesting medical clearance. Tharna's diplomatic signature. Evan frowned. Tharnas? That wasn't on the schedule. Viral froze. Hi, Chancellor Sanner. Your father? The contributor of genetic material. We do not maintain familial dynamics. She stood abruptly. I must prepare. His arrival will be formal. Viral, Evan said, stopping her gently with a touch to her arm. Is this going to make things complicated? She stared at his hand, then back to his face. The scholar Cass does not associate personally with off-worlders. I see, he said, letting go. We don't want to break any protocols. No, she agreed, though something flickered behind her cool mask. That would be inappropriate. She turned to leave. Viral, Evan called softly. That research on courtship, was it just academic? At the door, she paused. I find your species' emotional fluency compelling. Your openness is difficult to classify, but worthy of further study. With that, she disappeared into the corridor. Evan stared after her, raking a hand through his hair. A high-ranking Tharnas official, Viral's genetic predecessor, was inbound. Whatever had been quietly growing between them had just stepped into the diplomatic spotlight, and tomorrow on station, Aurea promised to be even stranger. The main docking platform of Station Aurea had been prepped for the incoming Glossari delegation. Commander Yelena Strass had activated full diplomatic protocols, and the senior staff stood aligned in ceremonial formation. Evan stood alongside Chief Medical Officer Patel, scanning the airlock as it hissed through its depressurization sequence. Across the bay, he spotted Viral. Only she was no longer the inquisitive analyst he'd come to know. Now she was a representative of the Scholar Order, clad in ceremonial regalia. Her previously loose hair was swept upward into a spiraled, crystalline crown. Her robe shimmered with embedded data filaments, the collar of her garment towering high in a show of status. She didn't even glance in his direction. The airlock opened with a mechanical groan, revealing 3 tall Tharnis males. The one in the center stood taller than the rest, his face marked with geometric biosigils. His deep green skin and glacial silver eyes made the resemblance to Viral undeniable. High Chancellor Sanner. Commander Strass greeted him respectfully. Sanner offered the briefest nod before letting his gaze sweep the line of officers, until it landed on Viral. She stepped forward and performed an intricate gesture of respect. Scholar Viral Sanner, second stratum, he intoned, his voice low and commanding. Your presence affirms the dignity of the Scholar Order. I serve in pursuit of truth, Chancellor, she replied, voice formal and sharp. Then his eyes locked onto Evan. Cold, calculating. I'm told there was a contamination event involving a novel pathogen, he said. Commander Strass gestured toward Evan. Dr. Maris and Analyst Viral contained the situation. Their response was commendable. You collaborated with this human? Sanner's voice dripped with disdain. The word might as well have been infestation. Viral's posture didn't falter, but her chin lifted subtly. The Scholar Order values data, no matter its source. Sanner stared her down. We will discuss your methods in private. As the delegation moved toward their quarters, Viral glanced back. Just once. What Evan saw in her expression wasn't detachment. It was quiet defiance. 3 days passed. Evan saw little of Viral beyond fleeting moments in crowded halls, always flanked by her father's advisors. Her expression remained unreadable, and the silence between them ached louder than he wanted to admit. Late one night, he sat hunched over diagnostic reports when the door to his office slid open without warning. Viral stepped inside quickly, sealing it behind her. Privacy override, she whispered. Evan rose, startled. You're a sight for sore eyes. I thought they had you on permanent diplomat duty. I don't have much time, she said, eyes flicking toward the door. What I'm about to say violates 6 internal regulations. The look in her eyes stripped away any hint of humor. Evan nodded, serious now. Tell me. My father's mission here isn't about diplomacy, she said quietly. He's here for the pathogen. The coolant leak incident. Evan asked, why would a diplomat care about a maintenance exposure? Because it wasn't a leak. That pathogen was engineered, she said, stepping closer. A prototype, developed by extremists in the Sentinel Order. Evan dropped into his chair, stunned. You're saying this was intentional? Not by all Tharnisians, just a radical faction. They want to enforce planetary superiority through bioengineering. Her voice cracked. The Scholar Order tried to shut them down, but we lacked evidence. And your father? He opposes the program. He's trying to expose it, but he can't do it openly. Aligning with humans would compromise his influence. Evan shook his head slowly, absorbing the weight of what she just told him. Why not tell me sooner? You were never supposed to be involved. But there's more. The strain we analyzed was incomplete. The full sequence includes a reproductive sterilizer. He stood sharply. That's not a weapon. That's extermination. Viral nodded grimly. It's meant to target humanoid fertility. They believe off-world propagation threatens Tharnis genetic dominance. Evan circled his desk, taking her hands. We can't let this happen. We'll get the data your father needs. We'll expose this. There's a risk, she whispered. If the Sentinels find out we're interfering, then we face it together, he said, squeezing her hands. We fought extinction-level events before. We don't run. Her gaze softened. This is what I don't understand about humans. You move on instinct. Emotion. You risk everything on belief. He grinned. Is that a compliment? An observation, she murmured. Their eyes locked. She stepped closer. The air between them tightened, electrified. He felt the warmth of her breath, the light scent of her skin, floral, subtle. What other observations have you made? He asked. You engage in physical intimacy even when reproduction is not the objective, she said quietly, eyes glowing faintly. And now, Evan asked, his voice lower. Now I find myself curious, she whispered. She placed her hand on his chest, her touch tentative. This gesture, it is used for evaluation, physical fitness, compatibility, scientific curiosity. Evan said, voice husky. She leaned in, their lips a breath apart. This gesture, too, is common among mates. Then she kissed him, hesitant at first, but deepening fast. Curiosity replaced by urgency. Her hands found his hair, his arms wrapped around her waist. When they pulled apart, flushed and breathless, Evan rested his forehead against hers. Was that still part of the experiment? Applied research, she said, smiling faintly. Very enlightening. Plenty more to explore, Evan replied, brushing her jaw with his thumb. I am interested in continued observation. But the moment shattered as a sharp, alert ping from his communicator. Security breach. Sector C, biolab containment breach detected. Viral's face turned pale. That's where the pathogen samples are stored. Evan was already moving. We have to stop them. Together, they sprinted through Oria's corridors, lit by rotating emergency strobes. As they neared the lab wing, security doors loomed locked tight. Override, Standard Protocol Sigma 4. Viral barked into the control panel. The door slid open. Stay behind me, Evan whispered as they entered. The lab looked untouched. Screens flickered. Containment seals blinked green. But then he saw a figure hunched at the command console. Even from behind, the figure's ornate robes were unmistakable. Father, Viral said. High Chancellor Sander turned, hand shifting toward a concealed energy sidearm, until he saw her. You shouldn't be here, Viral. And certainly not with him. We responded to a breach alert, Evan said, stepping in front of her. Sander's expression remained unreadable. I triggered it. I needed access, without alerting our observers. She told me everything. Evan said, we want to help. Sander's eyes sharpened. You've breached containment of state secrets. My loyalty is to truth, Viral said steadily, and to preventing genocide. Dr. Maris helped identify the pathogen, she added. His expertise could be essential. Before Sander could speak again, a deafening blast rocked the lab. The rear entrance exploded inward, smoke and debris filling the air. 3 armored figures emerged through the haze, weapons raised. Sentinel Order operatives. 3 Glossari warriors stormed into the lab, clad in sleek exo-armor, their dark green skin etched with harsh, angular combat markings. Pulse carbines raised, they fanned out. Traitor, the lead warrior growled, aiming his weapon at High Chancellor Sander. You believe we wouldn't intercept your transmissions? Before Evan could react, his instincts kicked in. He shoved Viral behind a research bench, positioning himself as a shield. Sander, standing tall despite the threat, greeted the warrior with composed disdain. Commander Rawkin, I expected the Sentinel Order would send its most predictable blade. You'll answer for this betrayal. Rawkin spat, conspiring with off-worlders, undermining Tharna's sovereignty. Rawkin gestured to the containment units. Secure the biocapsules. As the 2 flanking warriors moved to retrieve the pathogen samples, Evan caught Viral's gaze. No words passed between them. Just that sharp, unspoken current that had grown between them like a neural link forged in crisis. She rose from behind the station, her demeanor cold, calculating. Perhaps Commander Rawkin is right, she said. Perhaps it is time I remember my duty to Tharnas. Sander's eyes narrowed in confusion, while Rawkin's lips curled into a smirk. At least one mind has not been corrupted by human sentiment. Viral stepped forward slowly, her hands open and posture low. The scholar order served the truth and the will of the assembly. As she drew closer to the guards, Evan edged toward the control station, fingers brushing the emergency override. "The samples are intact," one of the guards announced, lifting a containment case. "Excellent," Rawkins said, turning his weapon toward Sanner. "The Sentinel Order thanks you for your cooperation, Chancellor. Your death will be regrettable, but necessary." Evan slammed his palm against the override panel. The room roared as pressurized air flooded from the vents. Viral dropped, pulling a small device from her sleeve and sliding it across the floor. It detonated silently, flashing blue. Both subordinate guards collapsed mid-step, their nervous system short-circuited by the neural pulse. Rawkin, protected by enhanced shielding, staggered but remained upright. "Traitorous wretch," he snarled, raising his carbine at Viral. Evan didn't hesitate. He launched himself into the commander, knocking the weapon wide. They crashed into a workbench, scattering instruments and tools. A misfire scorched the ceiling. Rawkins' augmented strength pressed Evan to the floor, but before he could land a killing blow, Viral delivered a precise strike to the back of his neck, just above his armor's flex joint. The commander collapsed like a cut wire. "Are you hurt?" Viral asked, helping Evan to his feet. "Just my ego," Evan muttered, touching a bleeding cut on his temple. "Chancellor?" Sanner emerged from behind the server rack, a containment capsule in hand. "Secure," he confirmed. "This will be enough to indict the radical cells." Evan checked the fallen warrior's vitals. "They'll be out for hours, but we should restrain them." As they bound the soldiers using the lab's restraint cuffs, Sanner regarded Evan with something new in his eyes. Respect. "You risked your life for me. Human. Why?" "Because it was the right thing to do," Evan said simply, "and because Viral believes in you." Sanner turned to his daughter. "You've chosen your allies well." Viral's cheeks darkened with a flush of violet. "Father, it's not." "I am not blind, child," Sanner said gently. "Whatever name your order gives it, interest, attachment, it's written all over your eyes." Evan cleared his throat awkwardly. "Sir, I assure you—" "Save it, Doctor," Sanner said with a faint smile. "Different worlds, different rules. But honor and bravery, those transcend biology." The lab doors opened with a hiss as Station Commander Strass entered, flanked by armed security. She surveyed the scene, smoke, restraints, downed operatives, and gave a low whistle. "Someone want to explain what the hell happened in here?" Later, with the warriors in custody and the samples locked in Station Oria's high-security biovault, Evan and Viral stood together in the observation lounge. Beyond the glass, the gas clouds of the Valion Nebula swirled in hues of pink and gold. "I didn't expect your father to be so open," Evan said. "The Scholar Order values evolution," Viral replied, "though I suspect he does not fully grasp what's between us." "And what is between us?" Evan asked, turning to face her. Viral hesitated, but her usual clinical detachment cracked. "I'm experiencing things that have no clear place in Tharna society. Longing, desire, affection, and they all point to you." Evan stepped closer, hands finding her waist. "I want to know you, Viral, not as a subject, but as someone who's becoming part of me. I want to understand," she whispered, voice trembling, "why your species clings so tightly to connection, why you risk yourselves for one another." "Some things can't be explained," Evan murmured, brushing a strand of her pale hair from her face. "You have to live them." "Then teach me," she said, her voice steady now. "Show me what I've never known." Their kiss carried no hesitation. The barriers, cultural, physical, institutional, blurred, dissolved. Their final night before duty would separate them was spent in Evan's quarters, modest, full of Earth relics, books, photos, a potted fern from South America. "Your quarters are filled with tangible reminders," Viral observed, running a hand across the spine of a textbook. "We ground ourselves in them. They hold meaning," Evan said, dimming the lights to a warm amber. She turned, something vulnerable softening her features. "I've been reflecting on our earlier encounters. The sensations were unlike anything I'd known." "That was just the surface," he said, stepping toward her. "I've studied your mating behavior since." "Your public archives are inconsistent," she admitted, her cheeks tinting violet. Evan laughed. They're not always helpful. She took his hands. I want to try the human way, not for analysis, but because I want to understand you. In all the ways that matter, he asked softly. Yes, she said, even the inefficient ones. Their connection that night was more than physical. It was discovery of each other, of vulnerability, of belonging. Her body responded in ways unique to Tharnis biology. Temperature shifts, violet markings, unusual sensitivities. Evan moved gently, memorizing every new detail. You're analyzing me during sex, he said at one point, half amused. I can't help it, she admitted, breathless. But my focus is failing. By morning, tangled in sheets and quiet warmth, Viral's head rested against his chest. Your reproductive practices are inefficient, she said softly. But I finally understand why. And what have you learned? Evan asked, brushing her temple. Connection, vulnerability, the surrender of isolation. These things cannot be simulated, only felt. She paused, then sat up slowly. Alex, there's something else. Concern flickered in his eyes. What is it? My internal sensors, biochemical feedback, during our intimacy. I detected unexpected responses. She pulled her data tablet from a nightstand and activated a holographic scan. Evan leaned in, studying the visuals. These hormone traces are reproductive cycle markers. Unique to Tharnis females, she confirmed. Triggered only during viable genetic compatibility. He stared at her. Are you saying? Viral's voice was quiet. Biologically speaking, we're compatible. And according to our archives, that should be impossible. These biochemical markers, Viral stared at the molecular scans hovering midair above the hollow projector. They're only supposed to appear during a formal Tharnis bonding ritual, with a genetically matched partner from within the progenitor order. Evan frowned, trying to keep pace. But they're showing up with me. Viral's expression glowed with astonishment, which scientifically should be impossible. She looked at him, eyes bright with the weight of what this meant. The Sentinel faction's entire justification for genetic isolation. It's based on the assumption that Tharnisians can't biologically reproduce with other species. They believe it confirms our superiority, our isolation. But if your body responded this way to me, Evan began, then it proves interspecies compatibility is not only possible, she said, taking his hands, but was likely known all along. The progenitor order must have discovered this generations ago. They've hidden it, controlled it, to keep the caste system intact. The implications hit Evan like a pressure wave. This could dismantle the entire supremacist ideology. Exactly, Viral said. Everything they've built crumbles under this evidence. Evan pulled her close. What had begun as professional protocol evolved into mutual respect, grown into something deeply personal. Had now become a discovery that could alter both their civilizations. Your father needs to see this, he said finally. The pathogen samples, your data, together, they could shatter the Sentinel narrative. I'll present it before he departs, she promised. But Evan, what does this mean for us? He met her gaze. I don't know, but I know I'm glad you walked into my exam room that day. Her lips curved into a teasing smile. Even though I refuse to participate in your species' strange gynecological rituals? He laughed, the tension breaking, especially because of that. As they drifted asleep in each other's arms, they had no idea that their personal bond was about to reshape the political and scientific landscape of two worlds. 1 year later, the Interspecies Biomedical Research Center on Station Aurea hummed with activity. In the main lab, a glowing hollow display showed the chemical structure of a now famous molecule. This, Viral addressed a class of mixed-species students, is a compatibility enzyme discovered through what we'll diplomatically refer to as an unconventional cross-cultural interaction. From the back, Evan tried not to grin. Viral's ability to understate their shared origin story had improved with practice. This enzyme enables biochemical resonance between Tharnis and human cells, she continued, previously believed to be incompatible. Its discovery challenges generations of progenitor doctrine. A younger Tharnis student raised a hand. Scholar Sanner, how did you first detect the enzyme? A faint violet flush rose on her cheeks. Through direct physiological observation, Evan stepped forward, rescuing her from further detail. Sometimes the most groundbreaking discoveries come from opening up to unexpected experiences, personally and professionally. The class nodded. The legend of their discovery had become station lore, each retelling more dramatic than the last. Later, as the students dispersed, Viral joined Evan by the viewport, the same one where they'd shared their first off-duty conversation. "You enjoyed watching me flounder back there," she accused, a smile playing on her lips. He wrapped his arm around her waist. "You've come a long way from the analyst, who nearly fainted at the idea of a pelvic exam. And you've come a long way from the doctor, who thought that was a good way to say hello." Their banter was interrupted by the arrival of High Chancellor Sanner, this time flanked not by guards, but by scholars and progenitors. The past year had reshaped Tharnis politics. The Sentinel Order had been publicly discredited, and reform had begun. "Daughter," Sanner greeted, his tone respectful but less rigid than before. "Dr. Maris." "Chancellor." Evan replied with a nod. "How was the council session?" "Successful," Sanner said, visibly pleased. "The integration proposals passed. The cast will remain, but fluidity is now encouraged, collaboration mandated, including provision for shared reproductive research." Viral raised a brow. The progenitors approved that. "They'd accepted a new purpose," Sanner said, "not as gatekeepers of bloodlines, but as pioneers of interspecies biology." After he departed, Evan took Viral's hand and led her to a quiet room, his old examination bay, now preserved behind a discreet plaque. "You're feeling sentimental," she said as the door slid shut. "Just thinking how differently this could have gone if you'd followed my directions on day one. If I had simply submitted," she teased, stepping between his knees, "we might never have uncovered the truth." "Sometimes resistance leads to revelation," Evan murmured, pulling her close. "I have something for you," he added, reaching into his coat. From his pocket, he produced a small, elegant band, made of Earth's silver and Tharnis light alloy. The ring pulsed with faint blue light as it rested in her palm. "This is a human tradition," he explained, "a symbol of commitment." She examined it carefully, her voice soft. "The scholar order would call this inefficient, symbolic, unnecessary. And what do you think?" Evan asked, watching her closely. Viral slid the ring onto her finger. The metal synchronized with her biofield, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. "I think it's perfect," she whispered. "A tangible echo of something intangible, like your books, your memories." She kissed him, long, slow, certain. That evening, the observation deck was crowded with dignitaries. Commander Strass raised a glass to the gathered crowd, to Dr. Evan Maris and analyst Viral Sanner. Their cultural misunderstanding led to the most important scientific breakthrough of this generation. The crowd clinked their glasses. Evan leaned close to Viral and whispered, "Should we tell him it all started because you didn't know what a gynecologist was?" Her eyes sparkled. "Maybe in another year. Some revelations require proper timing." Later, they stood side by side watching the approach of a historic vessel, the first Tharnis diplomatic cruiser with a cross-cast mixed-species crew. "I've been reviewing our journey," Viral said, voice quiet, "from first contact to today. And what's the conclusion?" Evan asked, kissing her temple. "That the most valuable discoveries begin with the most awkward questions," she said, looking up at him. "And that opening yourself to new experiences, no matter how uncomfortable, often leads to the greatest rewards." He smiled. "So, does that mean you'll finally let me give you that gynecological exam?" Viral laughed, the sound full of warmth. "Perhaps human male, but only because now I understand why you ask." They kissed, under the starlight of two suns, two worlds now aligned. In a vast stretch of space where diplomacy often failed and cultures clashed, it wasn't a grand alliance or a high-level negotiation that changed the course of history. It was a misunderstanding in a medical exam room. What began as a moment of awkward protocol between a curious Tharnis analyst and a seasoned human doctor became the spark that ignited a scientific revolution, a political reckoning, and a deeply personal bond. Evan and Viral didn't just prove compatibility between two species. They exposed the lies that held an empire in stasis and offered a new blueprint for connection, not through dominance or isolation, but through vulnerability, curiosity, and choice. As the stars of Earth and Tharnis glowed together through Oria's viewing deck, their story stood as proof that the greatest breakthroughs don't always come from sterile labs or battlefields, but from hearts willing to ask uncomfortable questions and minds open enough to learn from the answers. And in a galaxy still full of unknowns, that was the most hopeful discovery of all.